Hello, this is Mash It and Smash It, but you can call me Mash or Mash It for short. Well, now the time has come to look at a certain movie. Which movie, you may ask? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's an animated movie released in December of 1937, based on a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm that has a female protagonist, an evil witch as the villain, and a certain group of 7 that are in the title of the movie. I am, of course, talking about the stop-motion film, The 7 Ravens. Well, I don't know if it will measure up to New Gulliver or Tale of the Fox, but it looks pretty. I can't wait to check it out. Son of a bitch, you fucking piece of shit! Where the fuck are you? Ah! Okay, so it looks like this is another movie for the can't find anywhere pile. Who made this movie anyway? Oh, well that explains a lot. Guess I better skip ahead to the next one. So what's next? Oh my god. It's Disney time! Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. I mean, do I even need to go into detail? First ever Disney movie? Shot off a new renaissance with animated film? Hi-ho, mirror mirror, poison apple? Inspired multiple edgy retellings, including 2 mediocre movies made in the same year? Even for people who haven't seen this movie, they know its iconic legacy. It even inspired a certain other colorful children's fantasy movie in the late 30s. You may have heard of it. Created by the man, the legend, the anti-Semitic. Are we sure this wasn't the German movie released that month? Walt Disney and his team of animators. They deserve just as much credit as he does. Snow White is the oldest surviving movie to use traditional hand-drawn animation, preceded only by the lost Italian movie, The Adventures of Pinocchio. Interesting how Pinocchio movies make up 2 milestones with this one. So, in case my previous videos and everything I've said so far didn't clue you in, I will say it plainly. No, this is not the first animated movie ever made. It was the first made in America, and since America is quite notorious for its lack of credit to other countries, of course earlier animated works get ignored. That said, this is definitely the movie that showed just how profitable animated features can be, so it should also be of no surprise that animated movies started to become a business. Yeah, so far every movie I've looked at had an artistic purpose, and lots of hard work put into its animation, and this is most certainly no exception. But from here on out, things will most likely become less of a novelty, and I might start seeing some movies that, well, aren't good. Though who knows? I'm not very well versed with animated works in the 1940s, so I could be wrong in that assumption. The movie focuses on the Princess Snow White, who becomes the target of her wicked stepmother, known only as the Evil Queen, her real name is Grimhilda, when she becomes jealous of Snow White's beauty. When the huntsman, can't we just forget about that movie? It's not very hard, cannot go through with the Queen's orders, he warns Snow White of the Queen's plans, and she runs away into the scary forest. She is soon found by some cute animals, and they take her to a cottage owned by, well, 7 dwarfs. As they try to protect her from the Queen, said Queen creates a potion that turns her into an old lady, which she uses as a disguise to trick Snow White into eating a poisoned apple. And yeah, you probably know the rest. Now, I think it goes without saying by now how incredibly basic the story is. Disney has kind of become synonymous with movies about beautiful princesses instantly falling in love with handsome princes, to the point that they're still putting up with criticisms and deconstructions of such movies by know-it-alls who think they're being original by writing articles and making videos poking fun at them. Ooh, Belle has Stockholm Syndrome. I've never heard that before. Even Disney themselves are still trying to correct these old demons, and each time, there's still criticism with the implications. To be fair, there are some aspects to this movie that have not dated well. A young princess who's a little younger than you may think, falling in love with some guy she just met, then running out into the woods to live with a bunch of little old men, one of which is a hardcore misogynist, and another one who seems much younger than the others while showing signs of being mentally challenged, and all of which seem to have the hots for this teenage girl, all while she constantly goes on about how much she loves that guy she barely knows, before she lets a creepy stranger into the house despite the constant warnings not to, falls for her obvious trick, then the guy she barely knows comes along and kisses her supposed corpse, waking her up and then carrying her away to his castle. Yeah, from a modern standpoint, it's a little troubling in hindsight. Oh, sorry, spoiler, I guess. So do these things ruin the movie? Not at all. It's still a very enjoyable story to watch, and as long as you talk to your kids about the unrealistic stuff, or at least balance it out with some of today's more, grounded works, there should be no harm done. Need I go into detail about the animation? It's just so beautiful and full of life. Up until this point, hand-drawn animation generally relied on what was known as rubber hose animation. You know, that bouncy, wiggly animation style that was all over the place in the 30s. Obviously, Disney was the most famous for this style with the early Mickey Mouse cartoons, as well as others. But Snow White took animation to the next level. It's the first full-length movie to utilize cell animation, as well as one of the first ever uses of rotoscoping. Now I'll admit, this does create a bit of an uncanny valley effect with the human characters, especially in comparison with the more cartoony creatures surrounding them. But again, this was still very groundbreaking for the time. The sets are equally beautiful. They all have the splendor of a Bob Ross painting. Clearly an expert painter was hired to make them, and it immerses you in the world and all of its inhabitants. As usual with movies of this era, the characters are very basic. Snow White is essentially the audience surrogate. Not much to her aside from her desire to hook up with a guy she barely knows. Naturally, movies like Frozen and Enchanted make it a point to deconstruct this kind of story element, and how well each of them succeeded is anyone's opinion. Though I guess the least I can say about her is that she has some kind of desire to identify with, and her interactions with the dwarfs are kinda charming. So as bland as the character is, it's still present, which is a lot more than can be said of the prince, who serves next to no purpose in the story other than the iconic kiss. But honestly, if you took him out altogether and just had one of the dwarfs like Dopey or even Grumpy do the honors, sure, it would be kind of creepy in its implications, but at least you feel the bond they had with her. As friends, not lovers, let's not get into that territory. But yeah, I get it. This was before edgy fairy tale retellings became all the rage. They were telling a simple fairy tale, and it involves the bare bones definition of romance. So I guess he had some level of purpose for the movie. But he's still a block of wood with lipstick almost as pretty as the girl he has the hots for, so naturally he's the weakest character in the movie. The villain, as simple and basic as her motives may be, owns every scene she appears in. She's a lot like the villain from Prince Ahmed, but with even more presence. And once she transforms into the old hag, she becomes even more sinister. This is a fine example of a villain that makes a strong impression based on presence alone. She doesn't need much else, just a clear motive and a devious means of fulfilling it. I also must give a special mention to the magic mirror. He doesn't do much other than inform the queen that Snow White is clobbering her in the Fairest of Them All contest, but I just love the animation. So creepy, yet so interesting at the same time. But of course, the characters that steal the whole movie are easily the dwarfs. As cheap as it can be to have a bunch of characters whose entire personalities revolve around separate gimmicks, they run with those gimmicks, and the movie is all the more entertaining because of it. If I were to rank them from least to most favorite, it would be as follows. Number 7, Happy. His chipper attitude can be infectious, but he doesn't do a whole lot compared to the others. Number 6, Sleepy. Some funny gags here and there, but not much else to say. Number 5, Sneezy. He sneezes. A lot. Again, has a few funny moments, but they all revolve around the same premise. Number 4, Doc. I guess he's supposed to be the leader, but a lot of the time he seems to get bossed around by Grumpy. But I still enjoy his gunning rag, his raining gig, his gagging run,
What was I saying?
Nothing. Just standing there sputtering like a dooter ball.
Who's sputtering like a spoon? Who's gonna...
Shut up.
Number 3, Bashful. His overly shy shtick around Snow White can have some disturbing implications when you think about it, but he manages to be pretty adorable, and even has some of the best lines of the group.
My cup's been washed.
sugar's gone. You have to wash where it doesn't show.
Number 2. Grumpy. Yeah, his sexist attitude can get pretty old after a while, but he goes through what must be one of the earliest forms of character development in animation. I guess that makes him the most complex character in the whole movie. And number 1, Dopey. I mean, seriously, how can you not love this little goofball? Most of the best gags in the movie involve him in some way, and he's the main factor that gives the animation so much life. Now, as cheerful and whimsical as the movie can be, ironically, my favorite scenes are actually the really intense, scary moments. Disney was a master when it came to scaring the little kids their works were aimed at, and still giving them an overall enjoyable experience. The best of the bunch is also one of the most iconic scenes in Disney history. The scene where the evil queen drinks the potion and goes through a transformation scene ripped straight out of an acid trip. Least favorite moment? Well...
Now, don't forget, my dear, the old queen's a sly one, full of witchcraft. So beware the strangers.
Now, I'm warning you. Don't let nobody or nothing in the house.
All alone, my pet? Why, yes, I am. Come on. Come on, have a bite.
Oh! Oh! Oh, yeah.
Stop it! Go away!
Take me into the house.
Oh, come on! I know you're supposed to be 14, but even a kid half your age would know better. And finally, let's talk about the music. Hi-ho, Whistle While You Work, Someday My Prince Will Come. This is probably the first animated film to be heavy on musical numbers, though New Gulliver and Tale of the Fox had some songs as well. As dated as some of them may be in nature, it's hard not to appreciate the impact they made, and how they paved the way for so many other iconic songs in Disney's library. They all evoke the emotions intended, and for the most part serve their purpose. I suppose the washing song wasn't all that necessary, but it was part of a scene that involved some character development as well as some funny gags. But I would say that the soup song that was deleted from the movie, while having a similar effect, probably had good reason not to be included. I mean, who wants to listen to a bunch of little men slurping for 2.5 minutes? Regardless, the songs truly are one of the standout aspects of the film. Overall, while not everything about this movie holds up perfectly, the overall experience is still just as strong as it was when it was first released. This was the movie that changed the game. While the other movies I've looked at so far were very important milestones in animation, Snow White is the movie that showed people that animation had a very bright future in filmmaking. Now, so far each movie I've reviewed got either a 7 or an 8 out of 10 for me. And while I'm tempted to give this one a higher rating, its flaws do kind of hold it back. To rate it any higher would be to imply that it is at the same level as some of my favorite animated movies that would come out many years later, and it is most certainly not quite up to that lofty standard. But don't get me wrong, this movie is well deserving of its status as a classic. For that, I give Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs an 8 out of 10. Sure, animated movies, specifically from Disney themselves, would only get better, but for the time this came out, in terms of animated films, it truly was the fairest of them all. This is Mash It and Smash It. Oh no, I forgot my Christiani reference for this video. Forget it, the joke wasn't that funny anyway. Signing off.
We know who we are. Ask her who she is and what she's doing here.
Yeah. What are you and who are you doing?
Good night, everybody.